Kaiba dueled Marik in the Battle City finals. How would the duel have played out? And who would have won? In the original timeline, the semi-finals are decided as Yugi versus Kaiba, Joey versus Marik. Marik beats Joey, Yugi beats Kaiba, the finals are Yugi versus Marik, Yugi wins. This result is of course the canonical path because this is the direction that the story chose to go in. On top of that though, it is also the result that the majority of the players wanted. Kaiba wanted to duel Yugi first because he knew that he would need Slifer and Obelisk's combined power to take on Marik's Winged Dragon of Ra. So he needed to duel and beat Yugi first to take his Egyptian God card. This happens, except for the bit where he beats Yugi. Joey wanted to duel Marik because he wanted to save and revenge Mai as soon as possible. He also promised Yugi he would meet him in the finals. This result does happen and Joey was about to beat Marik, but then he collapsed and then technically died for a little while, so he was unable to declare his attack and win. Now, in terms of Yugi and Marik's desires, Yugi was kind of all over the place. He didn't mind dueling against Kaiba because they are fated destined rivals and all this. He wanted to duel against Joey because Joey and him have promised to meet in the Battle City finals and duel each other. But the main person he wanted to duel against was Marik because he didn't want Joey going against Marik in case he lost, which unfortunately did happen. And really, he didn't want Kaiba going against Marik as well, in case he lost. And on top of that, I don't think he states it, but then Marik would take Obelisk, and then he'd have to face Obelisk and Ra in the final duel, which would have been a huge disadvantage and probably would have lost. So then, that begs the question, what if we mix things up? Well, we have 3 hypothetical scenarios. The pairings are changed instead to Yugi versus Joey and Kaiba versus Marik. Could Kaiba beat Marik in the semi-finals of Battle City without Slifer the Sky Dragon? Scenario 2, Kaiba versus Yugi and Marik versus Joey. Kaiba beats Yugi, takes Slifer the Sky Dragon, beats Marik in the finals. Could Kaiba beat Marik with Slifer and Obelisk together? The third and most wacky hypothetical scenario, Kaiba versus Joey and Yugi versus Marik in the semi-finals. In this scenario, it is confirmed that if Kaiba dueled against Joey, Kaiba would have come out on top because he was able to beat Joey without an Egyptian God card. So with one, he should still beat him. So I think that is confirmed. However, to get our final pairing in the other duel in the semi-finals, Yugi versus Marik, Marik in this scenario beats Yugi. He takes Yugi's Slifer the Sky Dragon. I guess technically he would kill the Pharaoh, so he would move on to the finals. Seto Kaiba versus Marik Ishtar. Marik has Slifer the Sky Dragon and the Winged Dragon of Ra. All the chips are in Marik's favor. Could Kaiba win this duel? So, all right, let's go through them. Starting with the first one, Kaiba versus Marik in the semi-finals. So in this scenario, Kaiba is dueling against Marik first. Yugi is dueling Joey in the other bracket. So how would this play out? Well, first things first, Kaiba is at a serious disadvantage because he only has Obelisk the Tormentor. He did state himself that he needs all the help he can get to defeat the Winged Dragon of Ra, and he pretty much knew that he would need Slifer the Sky Dragon in order to do that. This is proved to be true because when Yugi duels against Marik, it requires both Obelisk and Slifer to overpower the Winged Dragon of Ra a bunch of times. And when the Winged Dragon of Ra would overpower, say, Obelisk, at least he had Slifer to direct an attack and tank some of the damage and things like that. Without that option, it is a huge disadvantage right out the gate for Kaiba going against him straight away. However, scale-wise, it's an interesting matchup. So think of it this way. Yugi beats Kaiba. Yugi's better than Kaiba. Yugi beats Marik. Technically, Yugi is better than Marik. Kaiba beats Joey. Kaiba is better than Joey. Joey beat Marik, but did pass out before he could declare an attack, but was about to beat him. So Joey technically is better than Marik. Now, I know what you're going to say. Marik might have been toying with Joey a little bit too much because he was kind of obsessed with just killing Joey rather than just winning the duel kind of thing. If Marik would have taken things seriously, would the outcome have been different? Well, unfortunately, we don't really know. But Marik toys with everyone. He's always trying to shadow game shenanigans people out of victories. So, you know, that's kind of one of the things. And if it's not a shadow game shenanigan, the way he tends to win as well is people just seem to want to steal the Winged Dragon of Ra mess up with it because they don't know the ancient Egyptian chants, and that tends to make them fumble the bag. But like, when you consider the scaling, if Kaiba beat Joey and Joey would have beat Marik, then technically Kaiba should beat Marik, and Kaiba beat Joey without an Egyptian god card as well, so Kaiba with Obelisk is stronger, so Kaiba should have defeated Joey more steadily, really, if he had Obelisk. So by that same logic, yeah, I guess he could have beat Marik with Obelisk. It does make sense. Now, of course, I know duels aren't as like simple as that. It's not just a matter of who has the higher number. There's a lot of different matchup things that need to be considered, but that is something that swings into Kaiba's favor for letting him win this duel. The next important thing to take into consideration is the weapons that both duelists have to counter each other. In terms of weapons, what does Kaiba have to battle Marik with? Well, right off the bat, he has Obelisk the Tormentor. It has a base stat of 4,000 attack points, which for Marik to deal with is quite difficult. Don't get me wrong, Marik has a really high potential of attack points with his Winged Dragon of Ra. Like, if he can pump all of his life points into that monster, that's a huge monster he can make. But he needs to have his monster all the time at its most powerful, because Kaiba has so many high attack point monsters in his deck. 3,000 attack Blue Eyes White Dragons, 4,000 attack Obelisk the Tormentor, a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon with 4,500 attack. Marik tends to sit with his Ra, like, more or less around 3,000 attack points. Don't get me wrong, if he summoned it properly, attributed 3 monsters, all their attack points added to Ra, and then dumped all of his life points in, he could have an absolutely massive Winged Dragon of Ra. But he tends to not do that. He tends to cheese out Ra with Monster Reborn. And I feel like against like Yugi and Joey, that kind of works because they don't utilize powerful attack point monsters very often. But with Kaiba, that's kind of his thing. So I think that could be problematic for Marik, to be fair. And let's also consider Obelisk's special ability. It has the effect that if Kaiba tributes 2 monsters while Obelisk is on the field, it will then destroy all monsters the opponent controls, albeit probably couldn't destroy the Winged Dragon of Ra since it's a higher hierarchy level as it. However, by doing this, he can deal 4,000 direct damage to the opponent. The fact that Kaiba needs to get out 5 monsters, it's not unheard of, but it is hard to do. But if he can do that, Marik barely, well, sometimes he has more than 4,000 life points, but a lot of the times he's sitting at like 1 life point. But I mean, that could deal with Marik as a final blow, so I mean, you can see it happen. Same thing again, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon is another weapon that Kaiba has, a 4,500 attack point monster that Marik will need to outpower to get over. However, to be fair, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon doesn't have any protections like the Egyptian god cards do, so it probably would struggle against Marik. Marik could get rid of it with his Phoenix mode's ability to destroy a card of the field. Marik also plays a card called Defusion, which lets him defuse monsters. Marik tends to use it on his self with the Winged Dragon of Ra. When he fuses with the Winged Dragon of Ra with his life points, he can split himself up to get his life points back. So that's something he can do. Or if Kaiba goes to attack and destroy Winged Dragon of Ra with Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, he could defuse it back into its free Blue Eyes White Dragon forms. So that is something he can do, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's something interesting with that. Crush Card Virus is a very powerful weapon that Kaiba has. It would eliminate all of the powerful monsters in Marik's deck, but I guess the Winged Dragon of Ra wouldn't be eliminated since it has unknown attack points before it's summoned or anything. So that wouldn't really do too much, to be fair, but obviously, Crush Card Virus is a decent card, and I guess it could get rid of cards like Lava Golem, which could be a problem for Kaiba in the duels, so that's something that could happen right there. Another big weapon for Kaiba was actually the card that he gave to Yugi to help him beat Marik, Fiend's Sanctuary. The reason that Kaiba gave Fiend's Sanctuary to Yugi is because it's a perfect counter to the Winged Dragon of Ra's OTK play, where Marik gets it out, gives it all of his attack points, and it attacks directly for game. So what this card does is it summons itself to the field, this little Fiend token thing. It will then tank the attack and deal the damage back to the opponents, basically turning their OTK back on themselves. Now, in the context of the episode, when Yugi does this against Marik, Marik is forced to use Defusion to stop his attack, and he saves himself from getting basically OTK'd by himself. But if we, I guess, could force Marik to use Defusion prior to this, get out Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, attempt to attack, Marik has to defuse it because it's too powerful. And then we go for the Fiend Sanctuary play. He doesn't have a defusion anymore, so that could be a potential way to win with Fiend Sanctuary. And I mean, like, that could be Kaiba's like final trump card. Obviously, when you structure the episode, if you're doing it like the anime, you need to work up to something. Like Obelisk tried to win the duel, but couldn't defeat the Winged Dragon of Ra. And then Kaiba resorts to this interesting strategy to go for it. And this is his like final play to do. Or I could see this actually failing, and then he has to rely on something else to go for it in the end. Another card that Kaiba has is something that he used against Yugioh. Kaiba's original plan when he dueled against Yugioh was to steal Slifer the Sky Dragon and then use it against Yugioh. Now, Lullaby of Obedience is an interesting card because what Kaiba would do with it is he gets to declare a level 8 or higher monster's name, and if it's in the opponent's deck, he has to add that card to his hand. That's insane. He'd just say, the Winged Dragon of Ra, take the Winged Dragon of Ra from Marik's deck and then put it in his own hand. Now, the problem with this play is everybody else does this. Bakura did it against Marik, Mai did it against Marik, and these things did not work out. But I like to think that Kaiba's would work because he does know the majority of the effects of the Winged Dragon of Ra. He's watched all these duels play out. He's also, I think, analyzed the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics that are on the card. So if anyone was going to pull this play off, I think Kaiba is the one. Then again, third time's the charm. This could be the third time that this could just absolutely mess up. And Kaiba does have ancient Egyptian heritage, so Ra technically would obey him and everything. So potentially. I think a big one as well for Kaiba's weapons is he has a card called Virus Cannon, which is nuts, by the way. When you activate it, you send all spell cards in your opponent's hand and in their deck to the grave. Woof. First of all, that's like a third of the deck gone for any duelist that has to go against this. But like the bigger thing of this is Marik really relies on his Monster Reborn strategy to bring back his Winged Dragon of Ra to cheese it out. So losing Monster Reborn and losing, say, Defusion, which is a counter to the Fiend Sanctuary play, this could be a really big deal. This could really hurt Marik, and I just think it's so nuts to have a card like that. It's just ridiculously strong. On the same note as well, I know everybody has it, but Kaiba also has a Monster Reborn, so potentially he could steal the Winged Dragon of Ra from the opponent's graveyard, because I feel like this is the strategy that Kaiba would go for. His plan is to try and take Ra at some point, use its power for his own to take on Marik and defeat him in his perfect victory kind of thing, which is always the thing that always lets Kaiba down, but that is something that he could have done. On top of this, obviously, Marik always has really low life points for the majority of the duel. He has ways of getting life points back, but Kaiba plays a card called Ring of Destruction. Damaging cards, effect damage cards, are quite rare in Battle City, but Kaiba does have one, which is Ring of Destruction. If he manages to destroy one of Marik's other monsters, like, I don't know, like a Holding Chains or just any other monster that he has, since most of the time Marik only has 1 life point, he could deal that final bit of damage with a Ring of Destruction play. Hypothetical, that's a thing. And with Magical Trick Mirror as well, this is a card that lets him, when an opponent declares an attack, he can use a spell card in the opponent's graveyard. So like, I could see a counterplay. Marik has, let's just say, a 6,000 attack points, Winged Dragon of Ra that he's fused himself with. He's only got 1 life point. He's attacking into Obelisk Tormentor or Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. As the attack is coming in, Kaiba activates his Magical Trick Mirror, activates the effect of Defusion in Marik's graveyard, defuses the Winged Dragon of Ra with Marik. Obviously, Marik would gain like 6,000 life points because he's splitting the life points back into himself. But a potentially 0 attack point Winged Dragon of Ra would crash into Obelisk the Tormentor or Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, dealing 4,500, 4,000 damage to Marik. That's a huge chunk of change. That sounds like an amazing comeback potential with this card. Now, I think the most important out of duel thing to consider is, first of all, Kaiba doesn't take part in many shadow duels throughout the course of the series. The only one he really takes part in is, I think, the duel against Pegasus, I think was one. And in the first episode against Yugioh, where he gets mind crushed. And then he only ever duels in like life or death games, and never really like the shadow games make it really hard to duel and things like that. So we never really see what Kaiba's like in the same situation as, say, like what Joey was. Could he hack it? Could he not hack it? Well, Kaiba's a very determined person. In fact, I think he's very similar to Joey in that aspect. Both of them are determined. They're unlikely to stay down without trying to get back up. They need these victories. I would say Joey has more resilience than Kaiba though. I feel like Joey would get back up more from defeat than Kaiba would. I feel like defeat to Kaiba or being completely overwhelmed would get to Kaiba than it more would with Joey. Because Joey is the underdog, that is kind of his potential persona. If Kaiba's absolute dominance with power fails, I can see that like, oh no, if my power isn't working, what else do I have kind of thing. So I don't know, you can make an argument with that. But in Kaiba's defense as well, Marik wields the Millennium Rod. The Millennium Rod has been shown to help Kaiba in a prior duel. During Kaiba's duel against Shizu, the Millennium Rod disobeyed Marik and gave Kaiba a vision of the past, helped him to defy destiny and defeat Shizu. Who's saying that wouldn't happen again? Who's saying that the Millennium Rod really misses Seto Kaiba's previous life, who was the original wielder of the Millennium Rod, wouldn't sort of sabotage Marik, and Marik would actually have to like cast aside his Millennium Rod in the middle of the duel. Like, I can't rely on my shadow magic against Kaiba. I'm gonna have to duel, oh my god, fairly? And that's kind of Marik's thing. So that would be a really interesting duel where Marik's kind of panicking because I can't rely on shadow magic to win with this duel. I have to just duel. But then that also means that Marik would have to prioritize dueling and focus on it. And you could see a really much better duelist appear in this aspect. So it could be a double-edged sword in that aspect. Now, on the other side of the coin, Marik's weapons against Kaiba. The big one, the Winged Dragon of Ra, is the ultimate Egyptian god. It is a level higher than the other ones. So just Obelisk going against it or just Slifer, they're always going to be a huge disadvantage. Technically, they can never really truly beat it. I mean, they can, but it takes a lot of work. So that's why two of them are really required to beat it. So with only having one Egyptian god, it's a big problem. Other weapons that Marik has is obviously the Shadow Games, whether they work against Kaiba or not, would be up for debate. Kaiba, if he uses Crush Guard Virus on him, Marik has a couple low-level monsters that have like quite detrimental effects to cards that Kaiba would have. So I guess Crush Guard Virus could not hit as many cards as maybe he wants to hit. And as well, with Marik having Defusion, that could be a problem because that hard counters Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, and obviously it can keep himself safe from the Fiend Sanctuary play. So those are options that could happen for Marik. Marik wielding that Lava Golem, Kaiba having two Blue Eyes White Dragons on the field, both get attributed for a Lava Golem, taking 1,000 damage every turn. That could be really bad for Kaiba. As well, Kaiba obviously as his big beatdown deck, having his cards locked into place by cards like Nightmare Wheel could be a big issue for him, because there's another card like Holding Chains and Holding Legs. I think they affected the player, but I think they do affect monsters. But that could be quite bad for Kaiba, having his ultimate monsters just locked in place as his life points slowly whittle down. And I think just in general, Kaiba's beatdown, overwhelming, I'm going to put big monsters on the field and just attack into Marik. I feel like that is a bad matchup against Marik's sort of slower, more methodical, I'm going to lock down your plays, I'm going to disrupt your board, I'm just going to really punish your monsters kind of thing. So I feel like that could cost Kaiba. Whereas like Yugi's like a jack of all trades, adapts to situation. Kaiba does adapt a little bit. He's more, he makes a strategy beforehand, implements that strategy, and then most of the time that strategy fails, and then he sort of crumbles underneath it. So we'd need to see a really stepped up his game, Kaiba, to work against Marik's devious traps. Now, in the same breath, there is something else I might mention. Now, I'm not sure if it's 100% true. I'd have to check to see if this is true. But when Yugi dueled against Marik, not only was his objective to defeat Marik and get rid of evil Marik, but he also wanted to save good Marik and free him. So the duel is played so that not only does Yugi win, but it gives an opportunity for good Marik to take over, and then Marik, obviously good Marik, surrenders, getting rid of his evil half, and then Yugi just wins by default. But Kaiba, I can't imagine doing this. He would just duel to win. He don't care about good Marik, and if he did care about good Marik, he probably wouldn't believe it. Magic? I don't think that. Yeah, this could be a disadvantage really in both aspects. Like, it's bad for Marik because it's just someone just going all out. There's nothing holding him back. Yugi was also held back by the shadow magic, slowly erasing little Yugi kind of thing. Kaiba wouldn't really have that, especially if he has a resistance to shadow magic. However, you could say it's also a detriment because after Yugi freed good Marik surrendered. Now, I've already done a duel analysis of this duel. Yugi would have won regardless, kind of thing. So, yeah, Kaiba loses out on potentially purifying Marik and just getting a auto win kind of thing. So, I mean, that is something to consider. Now, in terms of Obelisk versus Ra, Ra can deal with Obelisk whenever by just going into his Phoenix mode, paying 1,000 life points, and just blowing up Obelisk the Tormentor. So, like, that is a big issue for Kaiba, and that's something he'd need to deal with or react to. So, with all this in mind, could Seto Kaiba, with only one Egyptian God card, beat Yami Marik in the semi-finals? Yes, I think he could, but I think statistically, it's 50-50. I think it's a very even match, and it could go absolutely either way. Marik hasn't proved himself to be a great duelist. Don't get me wrong, he's beat Bakura, he's beat Mai. A lot of these wins are due to the opponents like fumbling the bag, not knowing what the Winged Dragon of Ra can do, taking it and then fumbling with it, or like shadow magic getting in the win. If Kaiba has a resistance to shadow magic, if Kaiba doesn't fumble the bag with the Winged Dragon of Ra when he takes it with Lullaby of Obedience or anything like that, and if he can just go all out, then yeah, there is a strong chance that Kaiba could win this duel. And I've already made the point about the scaling. Kaiba did beat Joey quite easily, not too easily, but easily enough where I think he was confident with winning. That was without Obelisk. And if Joey was going to beat Marik, then I guess Kaiba technically should beat Marik, theoretically. And then with this in mind, in terms of like anime-ness, this thematically works. Kaiba beats Marik and gets into the finals. Kaiba now has the Winged Dragon of Ra and Obelisk the Tormentor. Marik is just dead, unfortunately. Joey and Yugi's duel. Yugi beats Joey. I think that's the only way, unfortunately, that it works. But I think that Joey does win the Red Eyes Black Dragon off of Yugi in this duel. Basically, I think he does a play where he takes Red Eyes off of Yugi, gets him back onto his side, and loses the duel with Red Eyes Black Dragon on his side of the field. And Yugi's basically like, no, you've earned that. You've won that card back. And then I don't know what Joey would give Yugi instead. Maybe he gives him Time Wizard back. And then this lets Yugi use Dark Sage in his duel in the finals against Kaiba. And this could be something that's like a make or break moment. Maybe he adds back like Monster Reborn, because it's quite a significant card between Yugi and Kaiba. It pops up a lot in their duels. So maybe he Dark Sages with Time Wizard, gets Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn's back, Slife the Sky Dragon, he's able to win with that or something like that. And then like, yeah, you got a final duel, Yugi versus Kaiba. Kaiba has 2 Egyptian gods. He's so close to achieving his goal of getting all 3 Egyptian god cards, defeating Yugi and winning his entire tournament. But at the last possible moment, Yugi turns it around, wins, shall we say, all the Egyptian god cards. That's like a deal, because Kaiba would do that, wouldn't he? He's like, I'll bet all my Egyptian god cards. That's how confident I am that I'm going to win this duel. So Yugi gets them all. I don't know what happens with Yugi's lost memories. I'm actually not too sure. Maybe Kaiba needs to purify Marik. I don't know how that would happen, but that would be an interesting. You should have a different next season. Like, Shizu is mad at Kaiba instead. Odeon's mad at Kaiba because he just straight up killed Marik. So it gets resolved in the next season. I don't know. It's just a new storyline. Moving on to scenario 2. Everything I just said stands, but in this scenario, Yugi has lost to Kaiba, has given Kaiba Slife the Sky Dragon. So Kaiba is in the finals going against Marik, who's just beaten Joey Wheeler. How would he do then? Well, I think he'd do exactly the same, but better. I would say he's gone from a 50-50 chance of beating Marik to a 60, 65, maybe even 70% chance of beating Marik. I feel that confident that Kaiba could do it. And I think what would help his chances, I think what goes from 60 to 70% is if Yugi did the same for Kaiba that Kaiba did. Because Kaiba gave Yugi that Fiend's Sanctuary card to help him beat Marik. Now, Yugi doesn't have a card like that, but maybe you could give him a card that could help Slifer. It's like, Slifer requires a lot of cards in your hand. You'll need this card. So I don't know what I'd give him. Just something that you could draw a lot of cards with to help out Kaiba. I'd like to say you'd give him Ragnarok, but Ragnarok requires 2 spellcasters or magician monsters in order to use its ability, because that was the card that he used to defeat Marik. Maybe just change its effect slightly in the anime. He has to have 2 magicians or 2 dragons of eyes or something like that in order to work. You could totally do that. And then that way, Yugi and Kaiba together has technically beat Marik together kind of thing. So, I mean, that's something you could do. And in terms of the final scenario, we had Joey versus Kaiba and then Marik versus Yugi. Kaiba beats Joey because we know he can beat Joey. He takes, I'd like to say he took his Red Eyes Black Dragon off him, but he doesn't have it at that point. So he'd take something else or he'd take nothing. That's probably what Kaiba would do. And then Yugi loses to Marik Ishtar, gives him Slife the Sky Dragon. Now, the thematic problem with this scenario is Yugi dying after this, which would be terrible for the story. They'd never do that. So you're going to have to make it so that Marik's like, Pharaoh, I'm not going to kill you just yet. I'm going to leave you in suspended animation, one of those hourglass things, so you can watch at least the finals. I'm going to kill Kaiba, win this whole tournament, take the final Egyptian God card for myself. You're going to watch the whole thing, then you're going to die. That way it works. That way you can sort of keep people alive and everything. So then now, what an upset. What a change of story. Yugi, undefeated, has actually lost. The threat of the world is endangered. It's all up to Kaiba. He's never proved himself before to be a world-saving person. However, this is where Kaiba, story-wise, would have to do it, right? Or you just end the series with Marik winning and taking over the world or something like that. But, like, statistically wise, I actually think Kaiba wouldn't win this duel. If Marik has Slifer and Ra against Kaiba with just Obelisk, like, no, he shouldn't really be able to win. I would say Kaiba's chances of victory go down to like 30% or something like that. Don't get me wrong, he might be able to do it, but the odds are so stacked against Kaiba. But in that same breath, that would be the most amazing thing. Despite all the odds, maybe Marik takes Obelisk off of Kaiba as well. And then Kaiba has to go against all 3 Egyptian God cards with just his original deck, and he manages to do it. That would be incredible. However, that does rob the final season of its ultimate thing, where little Yugi takes on all 3 Egyptian God cards at once and wins, something nobody else had ever done. So, like, you've got to consider that. And with that, those are my opinions on what if Kaiba and Marik dueled in the Battle City finals. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything. If you want to buy yourself a weird hybrid of the Red Eyes Black Dragon and Blue Eyes White Dragon together, well, I have a t-shirt for that. You can buy it if you fancy. But other than that, thank you all for watching. Catch you later.